Waiting for the knife. If I could only
Here we are, listeners, on the cusp of a rebirth. COVID cases are dropping, vaccines are getting out, and depending on where you live, life is kind of sort of getting back to normal. I mean, the Pug just reopened in Washington. I mean, that is awesome. That means live music at the pie shop down the street isn't too far behind. So yeah, things are getting close to normal. So it's appropriate then that my next guest on 4Songs is going through a bit of a rebirth of his own. Matt Easton, lead singer, songwriter of the California Bay Area-based synth-pop post-punk band, The Jenny Thing, joins me to discuss his band's latest album, American Canyon. American Canyon is the band's first since 1999, which, if you do the math, was more than 20 years ago. Now, after the last year and a half we've all been through, 20 years ago may as well have been 2 centuries ago. Not only has the music industry been completely turned on its head, but so has our world. Although most of American Canyon was written pre-pandemic, in many ways, it is the perfect response to everything we've been through the last few years. The album focuses on war, devastation, but most importantly, it leaves us with a hopeful image. Despite all we've been through, despite every shattered norm, hope will always win in the end. But before we get there, a bit of history. The Jenny Thing first came to be in 1991, when Matt joined forces with his college buddies, guitarist Sham Rao and drummer Mike Phillips. The band's first official release, Me, in 1993, became the best-selling indie record at an area record store. From there, the band started selling out clubs in the Berkeley area before becoming regulars on the West Coast college tour circuit. The band came close to making it big, but called it quits in 1999 with their last album called Nowhere Near You, which was considered their swan song. Musically, the Jenny Thing was ahead of its time, somehow mixing 80s sounds like synth, driving bass, and lush orchestration with the sparse textural feel of 90s legends like Nine Inch Nails and Radiohead. Perhaps the masses weren't ready for that blend in the 90s, but today, I think we can handle it. You'll hear a bit of Erasure, Public Image Limited, New Order, Nine Inch Nails, Depeche Mode, sometimes all in the same song. I spoke with Matt via Zoom from his California home. We talked about 4 songs from American Canyon: Paper Angel, American Canyon, Lightfield, and Waiting for the Knife. We talked about how the songs came to be, how they were recorded during the pandemic, and just how important space and texture are to music. And just a quick side note, when we recorded this interview, American Canyon was slated for a mid-May 2021 release. It turns out that it got pushed back by a few weeks after we spoke, so don't get confused if you hear me talking about May 2021 a few times. Anyway, my name is Rob Thormeyer, and please welcome Matt Easton of The Jenny Thing to 4Songs. Hey, Matt, thanks for joining me for 4Songs. Great to have you on.
Thanks, Rob. Nice to meet you and get to see you here.
Yeah, cool. So the first question I've been asking everyone, so I started this podcast almost exactly a year ago, and during the pandemic was just getting started, and I've always been a big fan of songwriting and songwriters, but this first question is, how have you been doing the last year and few months now?
Yeah, doing okay. I feel like for me and my family, it's been, of course, I think mentally draining and a lot of change. And of course, now we have great signs of hope. And I think also another time of change that we'll go through again. So yeah, I mean, stressful, and also we've been fortunate. So, life's pretty good. And yeah, how about you? How have you done?
Yeah, I think much the same. It's we're vaccinated, and hopefully we can start seeing people and going to shows again, and hopefully you all can get out on the road.
Yeah.
Has this affected your writing? I mean, that's one of the questions I was curious about, what not being able to actually have a normal existence. I mean, I figure a bunch of the American Canyon was probably written pre-pandemic, but
yeah, the way the album worked as far as, building the album, the most active work on it was in 2018 and in 2020. So that did run into COVID. So I cut most of the final vocals during COVID and wrote one complete song. Waiting for the Knife was written completely in October 2020. Overall, the drive to make the album, I think, only felt stronger with COVID. And I think it is because, we don't think people are paying attention to us so much as we want to make something for anybody and everybody. So I think just the idea of making the thing and putting it out there was just increasingly attractive during COVID.
Well, let's get to the music. So American Canyon, which is coming, will have come out by the time this interview comes out. So the name of the album, I love it. And I think it fits so well. There's such a textural feel to a lot of these songs. And we'll be talking about 4 in particular: Paper Angel, American Canyon, Lightfield, and Waiting for the Knife. And, the name, you were talking earlier about how it kind of came together. You were settling on different names. I mean, was there a certain, how did you set that tone for the album as a whole? Because you were talking earlier about how the recording was done mainly in 2018 and finished up this past year. And it must have been difficult the last several months of that, trying to set a tone in quarantine, but how did that all come together for you?
Yeah, well, it was the song American Canyon itself and it was probably written in the middle of the chronology of how we wrote the record. There are 1 or 2 songs that either Sham and I collaborated on many years ago. That would be Paper Angel. We'll get to that. And then there were things that were written as recently as Knife, which was in October 2020, and then everything in between. But it was American Canyon, probably in that 2018 time frame, where we sort of looked at each other and thought, all right, this has like an attitude and a spirit to it, and even like a meaning to it that feels mysterious, and the track is working. I mean, we got something that sounded kind of 90% like that in about half an hour one afternoon.
Wow.
And actually on that day, Sham had driven down through American Canyon, which is a real place. There's not much there, but there's a place called American Canyon. And he was just going, what's up with that place? That name is just kind of knocking me out, and that same day we wrote that. It's not about that place. It's just a nice title. So when we hit that song, it was like everything that we'd worked on so far needed to be elevated. From that, we began to derive in my mind a kind of a like, I want to say it's a real place, but it's a fictional place, but a fictional place where a story could kind of track through and there could be pivot points. But I also sort of gave myself this rule that none of the songs would explain the story, that you would just get the emotional pivot points, not sort of arc, plot. I'm not going to talk about the characters. I'm not going to talk about, what happened, but I am going to talk about how I feel playing the parts in a way.
Okay.
And so it's sort of like we left it as this sort of linked vignettes when the emotions are in the songs and they are related by this place, but the explanation isn't necessary. Like I'm very clear on the fact that when you're writing pop music, and I love pop music, I don't want to get out of pop music. I like to be true to the, you have 4 minutes, you have 5 minutes on a good day, and you can't rely on a bunch of notes about like, here's what it's about. And you've got to listen to it with this other song for it to make sense. It's like, no, you can't live that way as a songwriter. Everything has to stand alone in my mind. So, yeah, but that's what the album, maybe the texture that you're talking about, at least lyrically, comes from that. And then I would say sonically, it's kind of a limited album. I feel like it's and that isn't to say it doesn't have energy or that it doesn't sound good. It's to say that the palette is somewhat set. And then I tried to get diversity in the lyrics and the images and in the different energies of the vocal interpretation, rather than kind of going like, okay, wipe the slate clean, you get all new instruments on this song and all new instruments on the next. The instrumentation is a little bit narrow, and I by design.
Let's start with Paper Angel, and I
feel like I'm taking a test, Rob.
Yeah.
This is cool.
Cool. Yeah. So I mean, how did this one come together? I mean, to me, this has a real New Order vibe to it. You mentioned earlier about them, but again, it's not like a derivative. It's just derivative of it. Like I think every to me, all music is derivative of something, and so
yeah,
completely original anywhere. But just how did this one come together for you, for the both of you?
Yeah, Paper Angel. So as a writing approach, that one goes back about 20 years. It's the oldest song on the record. it was written on a 4-track, actually 2 4-tracks. So if you're familiar with the
Yeah.
Porta Studio, and you take a cassette, you run it all in one direction, you get 4 tracks, right? So Sham actually wrote it, a first version, into a 4-track, and I think it had something like guitar, drums, voice. And I stuck it in my 4-track, deleted his voice, and sang over it. And then we kind of sent it back and forth. And then eventually, actually, I pulled it into a project I was doing at that point and made sort of an acoustic version of it. And then that was the last we heard of it, 15 years ago or something like that. But that was the first song that the whole group played together when Sham moved back to California in about 2015.
Okay.
Yeah, but when we hit this sort of more glammed up, electronified, if that's a word, version of it, that really sparked a new vocal approach. The vocal approach is, I almost think of it as like Carnival Barker. Like, I have vibrato now in my old age. So like I'm playing a little more with vibrato, which either I didn't want or didn't have, but now I have it. So I've decided I'll work with it.
Yeah.
And so there's a little more kind of drama in the way I think that I'm sort of trying to pull you in as the listener.
I feel you now. You're a part of me. And I wished you well, in all honesty. Don't fail me now. Every death you cheat. I hear the wishing well.
But in the album, there is actually kind of a character, Paper Angel, and in the name there's the meaning of something very powerful that might not be real, something very powerful that might be, or I should say, something good or benevolent that's weak.
Every day was a blaze, they all burned together. Glory forever, winter sun, lightless, listless towers. All through.
And so that the Paper Angel concept is supposed to introduce that. We also sort of thought of her in this story as being like a superhero, an unreliable superhero. And so it's sort of pleading and calling for her, and also sort of saying, maybe I can do without, maybe I don't need this.
Drowning and so strong, crushing, calling for me. All that I want is to bore you to pieces again. Paper angel, paper angel, angel, paper angel.
So it's a funny thing. I think limits were one of the big themes in the process. That I mean, you have to be economic with words, but also I think that can create an urge to start over every time. And there's so much power in working from a foundation, or like almost a fixed set. I mean, something I remind myself of is, a brand new artist takes all 64 crayons out and just gives them equal weight. But like a masterful artist can work often in, they might work in 6 types of red and a black and a gray, but they can take you, quantum distances with a few colors. And the limits are actually really, really good because it forces more craft rather than sort of allowing for just cycling as the way of giving diversity or depth. The craft then has to kick in if you're not just moving between different, almost like different outfits or like different. I think of cards and outfits a lot when I think about writing. So when you arrange or you put the instrumentation together, that's like the outfit, and then the cards are almost like the chunks of sound or words that you're working with.
So moving on, because I think we could probably talk Natalie songs for a long time. And American Canyon, which is the name of the album, and it's also the song. And this one has a bit of a darker, heavier vibe. I kind of hear you're talking about 80s bands. I mean, I don't know if you listened to PIL back in the early 80s. I feel like the beginning has that kind of Flowers of Romance, a bit of vibe to it. Just
nice. Yeah.
You don't never know what he's up to in the studio kind of thing, but but then it does kind of feel like it gets a bit more modern in the chorus and some of the more like Trent Reznor-ish type of stuff from the 90s. So that's a lot.
Yeah, you're hot on our trail, man, or hot on our trail. That's where it went. Yeah, for sure.
So how does that happen?
Yeah, that was the song that just emerged kind of all at once. It really was, sitting down with the sort of the set of lyrics from All in My Head, some that didn't make the cut, but we wrote that in about 30 minutes. I mean, it just popped like right out, and it sounded like that. We wrote that very modal, almost kind of a blues droney chord. It's sort of almost stuck in a chord. It just sort of keeps cycling on that chord. And we had not the bass pops, but we had that bass rumble. And then we had the two sections of me singing, the one where I'm a little bit more droney, talky.
When captors kiss the shattered lips,
and then the one where I'm really just emoting, it's sort of explosive and defiant. I mean, I think the for me, the touchstone for that song is, I mean, I'm often sort of into these literary devices or these sort of mythical or even mythological things, right? So like Pyrrhic victory, right, is an important concept,
right,
in well, I don't know, culture or what should we say, culture, literature.
Mm-hmm.
And I almost think of this as the opposite. So it's as though you're being defeated, and it cleanses you, or it burns off, leaving behind some heightened state. And I think ultimately the thing we want to leave you with is this idea of, or even an image of the architecture falling around So like sort of metal and stone and infrastructure are blown to smithereens, and maybe the flesh and bone blast through it and rise up and survive. And so it is, somehow it's both about being intoxicated by violence and studying the psychology or the collective psychology of war, and it's inspirational, right?
Yeah.
So it's like, can we get those jobs all done in that song? Kinda, they're all in there.
Black beams twist the heart of yokes. Tongues of steel and eyes of smoke. The frame is bent, the spirit's woke. War's ecstasy, I get the joke. The arches fall around me, still I am lifted up. When even hope rings empty, now there is only love. The arches fall around me, still I am lifted up. When even hope rings empty, now there is only love.
And that's the thing is, you just got to keep working because you get lucky. I think that's it. And you don't get lucky when you're not working.
Okay.
So yeah, this one, yeah, I don't want to say that we like said, okay, it's going to have Led Zeppelin drums and we're going to be in the key of G minor and we're going to kind of drone, and then we're going to bring in the arpeggios and I'm going to start shouting and it's going to sound, it's going to sound the way we want it to. So we were just doinking around, just sort of, I'm playing a G over and over. He's playing something on the drum kit and I'm just sort of humming along. You're just chasing what's good. And sometimes the good doesn't come and sometimes the good comes. So.
Yeah, really worked for this one. And the next one too, Light Field. I mean, I think the whole album it works, but we can only talk about 4 of them. Otherwise we'd be here for 4 hours.
Yeah.
So Light Field, it's very, like, again, this, the last song we were talking about is very different from the Her song, and this one, I mean, you were talking about pop songs earlier. This kind of is a pop song in a sense.
Yeah.
Light Field, and very, more upbeat. It sounds like, again, kind of going back a little to the first song, you are trying to, again, to keep someone up, and I kind of hear that throughout, like, we need to get through this, and I know this is probably pre-pandemic too, I imagine, but it seems appropriate.
Yeah, definitely. And in fact, we put that song out as kind of a test balloon. And I would say it felt sort of compatible with COVID because it has sort of that, sickness and worry theme that's written into it, but that was already written into it before COVID, but it gave us just that little bit more courage to say, yeah, this could be the one to test the waters and see who's still out there on social media. And, what happens if the Jenny thing puts out a song after, 20 years of totally not putting out songs. And the other reason we picked that one actually was, besides the fact that it just sort of had come together and we felt like it was a complete standalone statement, that it's very guitar based. It's far more guitar based than anything else on the record. You actually have 2 guitars going at the same time. I think it has the only strumming that you'll ever hear on the record. All the rest of the guitars on the album are kind of purposely very small. They're like kind of miniature sounding. That has that strumming quality that brings to mind a little bit of like the Smiths or the Cure.
Mm-hmm.
It feels a little more set, in that kind of, the Celtic folk song background of a little more, UK post-punk kind of stuff. And Sham does is really beautiful, especially on the outro on that one. You hear those arpeggios, those like chiming, cascading
Yeah.
electric guitar pieces. And that's very like old Jenny thing to me. Like that sounds like our second and third record very much. And you don't hear it on this record very much at all. So it's, I think it also works as a little bit of a just a lightening up in a way.
I see you checking out. I wish you'd fight it. Mouth to mouth and mouth to stone. You wanna see oblivion, but we're almost safe. We're almost home.
You literally get air from acoustic guitars, both the sound of the tone, but also the sound of the decay of the guitar and the acoustics of the room. And so I think that song has a warmth and a kind of inviting quality to it that's specific on the album.
I like the bridge. I mean, to me, the structure of the song is pretty unique, but the way the bridge kind of goes right into the last chorus and the last verse, and then the lyrics are pretty strong too. On the "Can't hope another day I'll take grief's freedom," you're kind of setting us up for a better future, I feel like, and the way that I can't describe it because I'm not a writer. I tried to be, but I just love how that transitions from that bridge into that last verse. It's just very effortless.
Can't hope another day. I'll take grief's freedom. Brass to gold and gold to bone, pneumonia in the winter sun. I stare into the light of my own eyes. Darkest when I walk through shadows.
Yeah. A couple of things about that. I think that writing the bridge, which we did last, was kind of critical to make the whole thing glue together. And the thing about that, I'm also like singing in harmony with myself in this kind of old-fashioned way. I sort of feel like, in that bridge, there's this point where it says the lemon trees outside, sterile winter at our will to survive. And it's supposed to actually be nature is writing a haiku about humanity and almost looking down on us, or looking down on us lovingly, but down. So the idea that the trees are actually memorializing us and observing us and writing about us. So it was sort of this like writing about fictional trees writing about us. And so when I say I'll take grief's freedom, it's like I just want closure. I just want certainty.
Yeah.
Even if it's the worst case scenario.
Yeah.
And that's freedom. It's a different kind of freedom. Yeah.
So last song, I do appreciate your time tonight, Matt. This is the song "Waiting for the Knife," which you said was the one that was written post or during the pandemic. So I'm always fascinated by how the last year change affected people's writing style and even the ability to write together.
Right.
So, and this one has a very, again, an atmospheric tone, which is very much a hallmark of, I think, this album in particular. But just how did you do that in this particular setting that we're all in and getting ready to get out of, but just still kind of trudging along?
Yeah. I mean, I would say from the way it was made was very pandemic-y in that it's probably 95% me playing on it, but also with a lot of drawing on the other sounds on the other 7 songs very purposely. So for instance, I don't play a lot of guitar on the record, but I am playing the same guitar through the same core setup that Sham is playing on a lot of the record. And then I'm also using a lot of my favorite instruments, almost like my guilty pleasure instruments. So you hear like a weird omnichord, which is this harp, like sort of this like synth harp thing that you actually stroke, has like a little metal plate, and it brings in this sort of ringing, chiming sound. Very good for making a song that's again about an angel. This song's another song about an angel.
Waiting for the knife. If I could only, I will lose my silver skin of water. Make it through the night, and I will take the knife and pour my silver skin of water.
The way it was actually made and what relates to COVID is I'm on it. Sham's coaching me from a distance in terms of, edit this. At one point he said, this is going to be a Peter Gabriel song, so you don't get to use any rolling toms, no rolling tom fills. And so we deleted the rolling tom fills, and that was a good call. So that was Sham producing distance wise. And then I had Mike come over and we sat in the backyard, and I played him the demo, and we made some notes about what kind of parts we needed on the drums. And then we went downstairs and we're masked and opened the windows, close mic'd all the drums. And he gave me about probably 15 minutes of drumming, and he got up and left. And I just took what I needed from that. And he's in there in little ways throughout, but especially you hear this nice airy, open, woody side stick on the highest heights of the song. It's kind of, and it gives it sort of that lift.
Waiting for the knife. If I could only, I would give away the breath of angels. Just make it through the night, and I will take the knife and leave behind the wings of angels.
And when you're writing this, did you have this in mind? Like, this is going to be the closer? I mean, do songs come to you like that? Because
yeah, very much. I mean, this song more than any was quote unquote written to order, and it was almost like, I was working for myself. And what I felt like was, I need 8 songs because I really want this to feel. I want it to be concise, but I want it to also feel like a full album. That was the first impetus, and then the second one was, I want this album to be a tragedy. So we need a song that actually brings the violence that's talked about. It needs to bring it full circle. And I mean, to be glib about it, I mean, I'm like, you put in the knives and the guns and the spears and the tongues of steel and all this stuff, and it's like, okay, someone's gonna get it. We've got to actually have that brought to fruition to make good on what we've already done. And I felt once I knew I had to do that, and I decided I would, I was super energized. It was like, this is clearly what I need to do. And then I actually wrote that song faster than I should say, I wrote that song and recorded it and sent it out to mix all within about 30 days, maybe 28 days. And I've never had a song so surely go from, I have, one chord and one word to, we are going to ship it like this in so short of a time. And I also was completely confident throughout. And I think it was because, one, I happened upon just a mood and a harmonic structure that could do that kind of slow boil interior introverted thing. And then it could do that big soaring. I think of that as like a Broadway moment. Actually, there are 2 kinds of Broadway moments, right? I think of the kind of coda of that song is the almost talking singing. Mm-hmm. And it kind of comes down, down, down. And it almost feels like there's nothing left, but almost like I'm just talking to you. And it says, I feel you now. I think it says, I see the sky and I see the earth and I touch the ground. And that's the end. That's the last thing the character says. And then it re-expands and it sounds sort of like Jesus Christ Superstar or something, you know?
Done it now. I've touched the ground.
It sort of has this really victorious feeling, even though it's got this like sort of punch out at the end, right? It's like, I'm gone. And the light has gone out, and then the light comes back on, and then it soars again. And I think those arcs are supposed to resonate very much with the American Canyon song and album, that it's got this like defeat and triumph are not opposites. You know, and so that song gets that done. I think I just had so much work had already been done to build the foundation that it sort of felt easy. Strangely, I don't know if I could do it again. I'll just say that it felt lucky, and the sensation was sort of easy on Waiting for the Knife.
Well, I want to thank you so much for your time. It's tonight for me, but this afternoon for you, Matt. As we are wrapping up, things are looking better. What expectations do you have for the summer and for the near future for getting out a little bit?
Yeah, I mean, full about everything. I mean, I'd just like to go to the movies or something like that at this point. That's going to be like a big thrill, you know. But we're actually working on doing a two-man style of performance that's very electronic based. For instance, like Sham's got a lot of him playing guitar put into a computer and then perform back out with a pad. So we're doing weird stuff like that. I'm still playing a real piano when we do that. And we're working on making that dual compatible. That is, that we could do it in a room with you, but that we could also live stream it to you. Other than that, I mean, yeah, it's like kind of climbing out of our underground holes and, you know, seeing what's out there again. And yeah.
And so what's the best way for folks to find out about you, keep up with you on social media, and find your music online?
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, we're active on Facebook and Instagram, and YouTube has some nice stuff. We actually have a really cool video for American Canyon that's going to come out right before the album comes out. Would love for people to check that out. It's really dramatic and I think inspiring. And then thejennything.com is our home online, and we hope you'll visit us there and check things out.
All right, cool. Well, thanks again for your time tonight, Matt. I greatly appreciate it.
Rob, really appreciate it. Thank you. It was great to meet you and to get to hang out.
So big thanks to Matt Easton of The Jenny Thing for joining me here for 4 songs. Check them out, thejennything.com, or you can find them on social media. Just do a search for Jenny Thing and you'll find them where you can. I got another interview coming up in a few weeks. It's going to be fantastic. One of those bucket list things. And after that, I don't know what to tell you. So it's going to be a little bit as I kind of rethink how this whole thing works. So anyway, hope you all are enjoying your summer and stay tuned for more. Talk to you later.